the class. And I'm going to share my screen. There. I want to thank everyone who's here, both from my class and for Teach for the Bay. We have a lot of, RSVP, so there may be people continuing to come in. So the Teach for the Bay has been going great. We had over almost 600 people come yesterday, and I haven't seen the numbers for today, but we'll probably have about the same, maybe a little more because we had more workshops. And it's just been really fun to be, I've been proctoring a lot of different workshops, so it's been really fun. And I've been enjoying seeing so many different people. So thank you for being part of Teach for the Bay. So this, tonight we are going to talk about how adults can support children as they recover from COVID. And COVID's not over, but we're in a very different phase than we were, a year ago, say. And so we are going to hear from two people in our class later, which is exciting. So they're going to talk a little bit about what they've seen in their classrooms and what they're doing. And so part of what we're going to talk about is that it's really important for kids to be able to express their emotions, and that gives them a sense of mastery. So when we start expressing our emotions, we start with very simple feelings. So there's 4 basic feelings: sad, mad, scared, and which one? And happy, of course. So even little kids, you can really start to help them notice when they're feeling that way. And you can describe your own feelings when you have those feelings. So we are going to start, and I'm just going to mute everyone because, there ends up being background noise. So we're going to start by hearing from these kids about their emotions, and it's called Kids Get Smart About Talking About the Wisdom of the Heart.
When I get mad, it's like I'm trapped in a cage and I can't get out. But I do focused breathing, and I breathe in and out, and I calm myself down.
Hi, my name is Isaac. And when I was at school in the middle, I was gonna cry because I was sad. But then I did focused breathing, and I stopped myself from crying.
Feeling sad isn't good. When I'm really sad, I usually put my head down like this. Feeling sad isn't really what I like. And inside, when I'm feeling sad, I feel like nobody cares, but everybody cares about you. And being sad is a part of life, and everybody has to deal with it. And we all like being happy more than we like being sad.
So that is just a very short video with 3 kids talking about how they use this one technique called heart-focused breathing, which we're going to do a little bit of right now. And what's really interesting is that kids from a really young age can start to learn these techniques. But when the younger they are, the more they need us to practice with them. So the younger they are, the more they need us physically to be close to them. So babies and toddlers, they need us to be holding them as we breathe and feel us calming ourselves down. And what that's called co-regulation, which is something we've talked a lot about in our class. So I'm going to present to you a little bit about the heart, this inner stillness exercise and this heart-focused breathing. And so basically, this is the idea that when we're connected with our heart energy, it automatically calms us. So right now, if you can just put one hand on your belly and one hand on your heart and close your eyes and just breathe. Just take a few deep breaths. This is a nice way just to center yourself. And having that coherence and bringing our heart into coherence with our body and our mind can actually really help us center, and it can help us actually support kids in no matter where they are and what they're going through. So I'm going to just click this inner stillness exercise. So here's what we're going to do. So I'm going to ask you to either close your eyes or look at a spot and with a soft gaze. And just, that's really important when you're doing this with kids, because some kids might not feel comfortable closing their eyes. So they may not feel safe. So if you don't feel safe, you're not going to be able to do a mindfulness exercise, right? So just go ahead and close your eyes if that feels comfortable, or look with a soft gaze down and keep your eyes open. Okay, so we're going to start tonight by doing the stillness exercise. As you breathe quietly, imagine your breath calmly slowing down the vibration of your mental and emotional energy. Stay with it. And don't worry if your mind disrupts you. Your mind is going to continue. We all have what many like to call the monkey mind. So it's normal when we're trying to breathe or meditate that our mind is going to continue to think. I know one meditation teacher who says, if we stop thinking, we die. So we want to be thinking. Thinking's a good thing. But we can start to notice our thoughts and not be attached to them. And as you breathe, focusing on your heart, try to use that breath to slow the vibration of your mind and your thoughts, and just let your thoughts float by like they're clouds in the sky. As you feel your energy calming, softly radiate love and peace into your inner environment, connecting you with your heart energy. Feel yourself radiating that peace and love. And if you'd like, while you're maintaining the state of calmness, you can ask your heart for guidance, solution, or deeper understanding regarding life issues you're experiencing. So we're just going to breathe and allow you to do that right now. So taking this moment or this minute of stillness to pause, and let go of the day, let go of everything that happened today, so that we can all be here together, present. So I want you to just stay with that. If you want to learn more about this, this website will be part of the slideshow, which I'll share with you by the end of tonight. And I really wanted to start tonight with this inner stillness exercise and a mindfulness exercise because, well, there's more than one reason, but we are going to go through some pretty intense material tonight. We're going to be talking about COVID and how it's impacted children. We're going to be talking about ACEs. So ACEs stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences, and they're usually ongoing traumatic events that impact children. And it's painful to learn about these, not only because we're thinking about the kids and how it's affecting the kids, but because most of us have at least one ACE, and some of us have many. So I want you to really take care of yourself, be present, and allow yourself to take care of yourself however you need to. If you need to go get a glass of water, if you need to take a break, really be kind to yourself and be curious about what's happening, because every opportunity that we learn about something like this is an opportunity for healing. And I'm happy for you to reach out to me if anything comes up that you'd like to get guidance about, or if you'd like a referral to some sort of support. I'm happy to talk to you, not after tonight because I have my class, but you can come to my office hours or reach out to me via email. Whoops. So there are a lot of these free tools online from this HeartMath. They sell products, but I like them just for their free. I've never bought anything from them. I really love their free activities, and I've used them some with kids, and I find them really powerful. So it's a resource that I'm offering. The other thing that I really like is that they have really good science backing up everything that they do. So when I talk to people who are maybe not so open to trying to do this kind of thing, I'll talk to them about the science of it, so you can learn more. And I want to share this picture was actually last year at a convergence. You could see Jupiter, and it was a night when you could see Jupiter in the sky. And I think that Saturn was behind Jupiter, or vice versa. Which one? Yeah, I guess it would be that way. Yeah. And it was at the Sutro Baths, and it was just the most gorgeous sunset I've ever seen. And it was a very, serene moment. So this is what we're going to do tonight. And I'll introduce myself a little bit. I forgot to include that. So my name is Tracy Burt. I teach here in the Child Development Department at City College of San Francisco. And you've probably seen my name because I'm coordinating the Teach for the Bay conference this week. And the class that this is actually a part of tonight is a 1-unit class called Children's Emotional Development. So you'll hear from a couple of our students in the class tonight. And this is what we're going to do tonight. I'll let you read it. I don't know that we're going to get through everything, but we're definitely going to engage and learn some things about COVID and talk about strategies. All right, so we are going to start. Part of what we're going to learn about is ACEs. Okay, so these are adverse childhood experiences. So this is an introductory video about what they are.
A child's experiences early in life are important building blocks for the developing brain. Genes, nature, are like the blueprint. They provide the basic framework for brain development. However, genes do not design the brain completely. Environmental influences, nurture, fine-tune how the brain works by shaping which brain connections get used. Connections that are used more grow stronger and more permanent, whereas ones that do not get much use fade away. Together, genes and the environment build the foundation for all future development. Safe, stable, and nurturing relationships early in life lead to healthy development. But children's brains capture other experiences as well. Stressful events. However, not all stress is bad. Positive stress involves normal childhood experiences, like starting daycare or meeting a new person for the first time.
I just wanted to stop to say the positive stress, we saw examples of positive stress in the very beginning when we saw the kids, the toddlers meeting their baby siblings for the first time.
Stress is essential for healthy development because it helps children develop coping skills and confidence. But when stress is frequent, chronic, and uncontrolled, it is toxic to children, especially when they do not have a caregiver to provide support or buffer the stress. Adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, such as abuse, neglect, exposure to intimate partner violence, parental depression or addiction, and poverty, are toxic stressors which could lead to lifelong changes in learning and behavior. ACEs early in development can impact social, emotional, and cognitive functioning, increased risk-taking behavior such as drinking and substance use, and increased risk of disease, disability, and social problems later in life. The question is, how do adverse childhood experiences impact a lifelong development? One of the most important systems in our body is our stress system. It's activated when we experience stress. We become alert, our heart rate increases, and so do our stress hormone levels, cortisol and adrenaline. Our body is ready to react, what is known as fight or flight. A short period of time after the stress is over, or if a child receives support from a caregiver, the stress response turns off and the body returns to a normal state. Adverse childhood experiences create stress responses that stay active, and without the support of a caregiver, the system has difficulty shutting off completely. This constant and prolonged activation can affect immune system functioning and increase the chances of sickness, infection, and disease. Prolonged activation of stress hormones is also toxic to the brain. Certain areas of the brain are more vulnerable to toxic stress, including the executive center or the brain's control center, an area important for solving complex problems, attention, reasoning, impulsivity, inhibition, and learning. A second area is the emotional center, the brain's alarm system, which is involved in processing and interpreting emotions and the ability to control impulses. The third area is the memory and learning center, the brain's filing cabinet, which plays a major role in learning and the formation and retrieval of memories. Science shows that adverse childhood experiences impact all of these brain centers. Behaviorally, what we begin to see is emotional distress, poor emotion regulation, greater impulsivity, learning difficulties, and physical and mental health problems. More recently, science has begun to look at how ACEs cause changes in gene expression through a process called epigenetics, which helps us understand how nature and nurture interact. Epigenetics causes changes in the way genes work without changing the DNA code itself. This occurs through chemical changes influencing how the code is used. In other words, genes are like the hardware in a computer. They determine the boundaries of what is possible. However, we need an operating system to tell the hardware what to do. Epigenetics is like the operating system directing the function of a gene's DNA hardware. The genes we are born with are the genes that we have for life, but experiences like nutrition, exercise, smoking, stressors, and relationships all affect our biology. Adverse childhood experiences are associated with epigenetic changes related to stress, brain development, cognition, and systems associated with mental and physical health. Changes that happen early in brain development are more likely to be enduring and are possibly passed on to future generations as well. The good news is that positive, supportive relationships at any stage in life can make a difference. However, supporting families and children early on will help prevent many of these negative outcomes. One of the key ingredients for healthy development is having warm, loving, and actively engaged caregivers. This involves promoting serve and return interactions, where caregivers actively and warmly engage with the child, making eye contact, responding to sounds, words, gestures, emotional needs, and sharing experiences like reading and play. Providing programs that support caregivers to strengthen these abilities are the blocks that build healthy foundations for life.
Okay, so I want to hear from you. We're going to do what's called a waterfall. And I just learned this technique today. So I want you to put something in the chat, but don't press enter. So I want you to answer a question. So I want you to answer the question in the chat. And then when I tell you, you're all gonna all press enter. So we'll all see it in the chat at the same time. So the question is, what is the most important thing that children need to be resilient? So what do children need so that they can be resilient in the face of stressors? So about 10 more seconds to write that in the chat. What do children need to be resilient? So I'll write it in the chat too. What do children need to be resilient? But don't post it yet. Wait to post it. Okay, post now. Beautiful. So check those out. Mindfulness, love, a safe adult, someone to help them process their feelings, support, responsiveness, relationship. Yes. So that's important to remember when we're learning about this stuff. All right. So we are going to go into breakout rooms of 3 or 4, and these breakout rooms are going to be brief. And what I want you to, the question I want you to answer is, do you think COVID is an ACE based on what you just learned about ACEs, and those are ongoing toxic experiences for kids? Do you think COVID and experiencing COVID is an ACE or an adverse childhood experience for all children? Why or why not? So what factors would make it more likely to be an ACE? And the hint is that this is not a yes or no answer, right? This is a very nuanced answer. So, oops. Let's see. So I'm going to open the rooms. You're going to be there for about 4 minutes. So that you're going to have 3 or 4 people in each room, and I will let you know when to switch to the next person. Let's see if I can open them. All right, I'm going to open the room so you can all go to your breakout rooms. I'm going to turn on my timer. Okay, so everyone needs to go to a breakout room. Oh, did they not open? Okay, they didn't open. That's why.
Okay.
All right. All right. So go to your breakout room and I will let you know. Hi, Yishan. I'm going to assign you to a breakout room. See, we're in breakout rooms and they will tell you what we're talking about, okay? So, so we know that COVID has impacted everyone, right? And it's been difficult for most everybody, if not everybody. So what are the factors that make it more or less difficult for a child? Factors that you talked about in your group. Just post those in the chat.
Are we doing a waterfall again or just post whenever?
We'll just post. We won't do a waterfall this time. Financial instability. Having a support system is huge. There's lots of evidence of how much a support system for the family helps. Job loss, level of love, social life, mental illness, absolutely could be really intensify mental illnesses, and it triggered mental illnesses for people as well. SES again, that's social socioeconomic status. Age and experience, absolutely. Social segregation, So there's a lot more isolation, income, food, home, space. So whether people were able to stay in their homes, whether they had a home that they could go outside, whether they had to be stuck in a very small space with few people. I had a lot of students who have 3 kids and they were in a 1-bedroom apartment. That's really hard to have 3 kids going to school and you trying to work. Physical contact, missing physical contact. It's a big deal. When they come back, having to relearn how to socialize. So social interaction is the biggest thing we're seeing, but that is also impacted by many factors, but especially impacted by the kind of space that people have access to, because a lot of people still went to parks and things like that. So they might have a little bit of social interaction. And then if people had access to technology, they could have social interaction via Zoom or something like that, right? The loss of home, no place to sleep. So if things were hard before, they pretty much got harder, right? During COVID. And the impact also is mitigated by the family being able to support their kids. And the more stressed families have, the harder it is to support their kids, right? It's just, that's true for all of us. As a parent, I know if I'm stressed, it's harder for me to be present. I have to really be intentional and to be the best mom that I can be, right? And the best teacher that I can be. So food and income's instability. So, you didn't talk about one thing that's really important is race, and where your community has made a huge difference on COVID. Because, let's see, I'm going to ask everyone to mute. So we'll see some of the statistics around that, but we know that death and illness, severe illness rates were most intense in Native American, Indigenous communities, Black and Latino communities. There were other things that happened during COVID that were stresses that were related to race. So the anti-API violence was a huge factor last spring. So there was so much anti-Asian violence related to people's prejudices and stereotypes around COVID in particular. And then Black Lives Matter the summer before was very stressful for many people of color, many Black folks in particular, because they had to see over and over the kinds of police brutality that people in their family or themselves have been and are subjected to. So it was both an opportunity for awakening, and people felt a sense of support, and it was stressful, and there were a lot of mental health issues that came up. So we are, like I said, we're talking about a lot of things that are difficult to talk about, right? Domestic violence. I just saw someone wrote domestic violence. That's a really important one to look at. And I did a survey in one of my classes this semester, and I had more people say that they yes or maybe needed resources about domestic violence than I usually do. And I was really sad. You know, it's just because it saddens me that people are experiencing that, and it's real. And so there are times when families, if there was domestic violence or existing abuse, most of the time it got more intense, right? There were some people that maybe decided that they were going to make a change, but we know that there were a lot of kids exposed to more abuse. So this is actually from the CDC. We're going to go back to talking about this pyramid and the different impacts of ACEs. So we see that social conditions, which is actually below adverse childhood experiences, more of a foundational piece, was really disrupted by COVID for everybody, right? And so if kids were also experiencing any kind of abuse or domestic violence, then that was layered on top of this. And then at the bottom, we see generational embodiment or historical trauma. So historical trauma that our families and communities have experienced still lives in us until we have the opportunity to heal it, and until we can make that, I would say, choice. And it is on some level a choice, but people need resources too and support. So I don't put it only on the individual, but really our society because our society really has to acknowledge our wrongs and acknowledge the truth of our history. And that's a starting point for healing on a community level and generational level. So these are all the other things. I mean, ACEs are really important. And I'll tell you, when I started working with kids exposed to domestic violence, I might have told my class this before. I apologize if you're hearing it again. But when I started working in this one shelter, I had been working in domestic violence prevention for a few years, but I started working in one shelter. It was 1998. And I had just gotten my master's, which was a combination clinical educational master's in childhood risk and prevention. So how children are impacted by trauma and how we help children, families, and communities heal from trauma. And so I got this job, and I said, well, I would want to provide some counseling for the kids. Would that be good with you? And they said, oh yeah, absolutely, you can do that. And when I got there, all they wanted me to do was childcare. And which is important, right? The moms had a requirement to go to the groups. And I said, but I'm happy to do that and figure out how to train volunteers to do childcare, and I can help with that, but I need to do things also for the kids. And people were like, no, the kids are fine. Kids are resilient. You know, if the mom's okay, the kids are going to be okay. Does the mom need to be okay for the kid to be okay? Yeah, absolutely. Does the kid also need their own services and their own attention and their own healing? Absolutely. But I had to fight for that. I had to fight to be able to do that. And it was a labor of love. And at that point, you know, it was really hard to talk about the impact of domestic violence in particular on children. People thought, oh, well, it's impacting the mom, but it's not really impacting the kid. But actually, like, babies and toddlers are probably the most impacted, because it's almost like your body they are so connected to their mother. It's usually the mother that the physical abuse is happening to. And so it's having profound effects, as you can see in this pyramid, disrupting the neurology and the cognitive development of children. So this is really important that we are able to talk about this, that we build the capacity to keep talking about this so that we can act on it and make changes. Oh. Okay. So I'm trying to go to this. Okay. So I'm going to show you this. This is from the Center on the Developing Child at Harvard, and I really recommend them as a resource. If someone might put that in the chat as a resource, they're science-based, and they got together as scientists, basically saying we have to have a better early childhood system that supports families and healing so that our kids can do well. And there's science to back this up. So in a very similar vein as kind of what I was doing as a children's program coordinator, that's what they were working on at the same time. Around the same time, they came together and said, we need to change the dialogue. And it's really different now. I mean, people know that it's traumatic for children to be exposed to domestic violence. It's not an argument anymore. Tiffany, do you have your hand up?
Sorry, I lost my Zoom focus. I was trying to put that in the chat. Yeah, so a quick question around the domestic violence resources here in San Francisco. What do you think like the top ones would be to give to families, like the top 2 or 3 that would be good for families?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say probably off the top of my head, Woman Inc. and
and you could think it over and let me know.
Let me think it over. And when you're in the breakout rooms, I'll remember the other one that I know which one I want to recommend.
I'm trying to put together a resource list to give out at conferences for like some mental health, some DV, and some like healthcare resources for our families, just so that they.
Oh, great. I have some links from a presentation I was at today, and I can forward that to you all.
Well, thank you.
Just following up on that question, the most important thing when they study how people get out of domestic violence situations, the most important thing is that people need to know that there are resources and there's a place to go. And so they need to know that there's a safe shelter that's confidential where their person who's abusing them can't find them. So that's one of the most important things. The other really important thing when they look at communities and when communities change domestic violence is people's attitudes. Like whether people say, oh, it's just a thing, it's just in the family, that just happens, that's just normal. If that's the cultural value, then there's not a lot done about domestic violence. So changing that cultural value is something that we can really, we can have an impact on. So I just wanted to, so you've been looking at this diagram a little bit. So it makes sense, right, that the more ACEs a child experiences, the more stress they have. And what we didn't know until a few years ago, and what it took, and it actually took a few years for it to be more accepted. Now it's much more accepted that ACEs are connected with these health outcomes for people in their life. So they're more likely to suffer from things like heart disease, diabetes, poor academic achievement, and substance abuse later in life. So I will tell you that one of the things that people used to say to me all the time was, children are resilient. Can you guys see my video right now, or you only see the PowerPoint? You can see my video, right?
Yes, the power on the page.
Only the PowerPoint.
But you can't see my video at all?
I do.
You do? Okay, so I think it might be how you view the Zoom. But so well, I would like for you to be able to see it so it's profound. So what people used to say to me all the time was, like I said, children are resilient, they'll work it out. And I said, no, they will not by themselves, not without that support. They need support to work it out. And actually the most impactful intervention for kids who are exposed to domestic violence is to be part of a group of kids where they can break the secret with each other and where there are other kids. I worked with, I used to have support groups in the shelter, and I usually did ages like 5 to 10 and then 11 to 16 or something like that. And one time I had only 2 families. And so I had a girl who was 12 and a girl who was 5. And they did a support group together. And the girl who was 12 was like completely blown away that another kid from another race, from another, who is a different age, also had these experiences. And they talked about together, they shared some of their experiences, and it made a profound difference for her. So being able to know that they're not alone and have a sense of belonging is really powerful for kids. And when they study interventions, that's the one. So if you can find those, and they're kind of hard to find, but if you know kids that need that, that's what I would look for them. So toxic stress explains how these experiences can kind of get under our skin and change our neurobiology. And other things that make it worse, right? Like racism and community violence, which which I mentioned before. And basically, when our stress system is that activated, it stays activated. So one of the questions I like to ask is, how long, and you can put this in the chat, how long does it take you to get stressed? If you're getting really stressed, I apologize, I have a little dog that likes to bark. If you have, so how long does it take you to get stressed? How many seconds or minutes does it take you to get stressed? Let's see if you put that in the chat. 3 to 4 minutes. I see 0.5 seconds. Oh, yeah, 0.5 seconds, 0.01 second, 1 second, 10 seconds, 1 second. Yeah, it can be instantaneous, right? And now I want you to put something else in the chat. How long does it take you to go back to your normal level of relaxation? Forever, a few minutes. God, I'm impressed with people. They could go a minute. It takes me a lot longer than a minute if I get really stressed. A really long time if I'm not aware. I like that when we are aware of it and we know how we can bring ourselves back to stasis or calm space, we can get ourselves back there more quickly. But it takes our bodies a long time to calm back down because our cortisol is running through our bodies. And we're on high alert, and our whole body changes when we go into fight or flight mode. So our pupils get bigger because our brain is telling us you're in danger. So our pupils get bigger so that we can take in all of everything that's happening around us, all the nonverbal cues. And that's why kids who have trauma, when you put your hand up by them, they might cower or jump back because their body's telling them you're still in danger, because their body got to be in such a state of high stress for so long that it's like a trigger response. It's a quick response. So our responses to stress also have to do with how much trauma and stress we've experienced and how much healing we've done, right? And I will, if I've mentioned 2 of my favorite books, but I would say the most recent famous book that I really like about trauma is it's by Bessel van der Kolk, and it's called The Body Keeps the Score. If someone could write that in the chat, that would be great. The Body Keeps the Score. Yes, Tiffany?
One question that I have is sort of this idea around, like, I can deal with a lot of stress in a lot of places, but like I'll get super upset with my husband, like in a way that I don't like. I'm like, why? Like, it doesn't even make sense sometimes. Is there anything that you could say about like sort of the I don't know, like the relationship, or if it's like if it's somebody that you see a lot, like you tend to like get fed up more quickly?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, he
So
also,
here's,
like when he's late or something, and it's not him. Doesn't really matter about what he's doing. It's mostly like,
Right.
why do I react more strongly to him?
Right.
You
So,
know?
I mean, that's a question probably people have written books about. And so it's a good question. It's something that's really normal or typical, is that we do get the most upset with the people that we're closest to. And what I believe about that is, and I'm not a therapist, but what I believe about that is that the people who are closest to us are the ones we feel the safest expressing ourselves to on some level. And also there are so many interactions that sometimes things can build up. Let's see, there's one more piece, is that the people who are closest to us also bring up our deepest issues, our hurts that we might be not even conscious of, that live in our bodies or our minds. So all of those reasons. So, and I will offer I guess, I don't like the word strategy so much sometimes, but one technique that I use is really for practicing forgiveness of myself and others. And that can be really a powerful thing to do.
Thank you.
Everyone in my class knows my little dog. This is Lulu. And she also has had trauma. So when we first got her, when I would put my hand up by her, if she was eating, she would start cowering. And so we know that she's had trauma, and she really gets stressed in the dark. So whenever I'm teaching the class at night, I tried. I put her in her crate that she's only in at night, right? Yes, you're very sweet. I know. Okay. So
I like how she is. She's
thank
so
you.
sweet.
She's very sweet.
Did
She's
you
very
censor
sweet.
her?
Sorry?
Did you censor her, or is that your background?
Oh, yeah, that's my background. So sometimes she fades into the background and gets blurred.
Okay.
So I want to go into now just a few definitions of ACEs. I just want to do a time check where we are. Okay. So these, I'm not going to read these, but I'm going to allow you to read these. So these are what's defined as an ACE, or an adverse childhood experience. And again, these are the ones that in the research are, the more you have, the more likely you are to have things like heart disease or diabetes. And yeah, we have all of those. I'm going to tell you one story from when I was working with kids in the shelter about emotional abuse. So a lot of survivors of domestic violence actually will tell you that emotional abuse is harder to deal with than physical abuse. And they say, well, you can't see it. Whoops. You can't know, you can't say, oh, look, I have a bruise, right? So, but it really, it goes real deep. So I'm going to tell you this story about a kid at the shelter who I worked with. And one of the things we used to do at the shelter is we knew that the way that touch and physical communication was used in their homes was not appropriate because people were being hurt, right? People were being hit. And what I would tell the kids is I would say, every person has a right to their body and to decide when they want to hug and not. And here's the thing is we in our office, we would love to give you a hug, but we are never going to try to give you a hug or say, do you want a hug? Because, or almost never, because we want you to be in charge. And we think you might think that we expect you to say yes. And we wouldn't want you to feel that way. But if you want a hug, come in here anytime, knock on the door or come in when our doors open and ask for a hug, because we'd love to give you hugs. And there were some kids that never asked for a hug. And there were other kids that came a few times a day, every time they came by the office and they asked for a hug. So it was this way of really trying to establish and reinforce the basic idea that every human has a right to their body and how they're touched. And also give them an opportunity to have appropriate affection, because that's so important for healing. And it's so important for us as humans. So, I mean, everyone's different, but in general, it's really important. So I'm going to tell you, one of the kids who used to ask for a hug, he told me the story about his dad yelling at him. I don't know if I remember the whole story, but his dad he said when he was on the sidewalk, he would like to draw with chalk, and his dad used to yell at him and call him names and things. He was only 5 years old, but he said that those hugs really helped him feel like he could tell me about that. And that's kind of how that was one of the ways that he he was able to share that with me and feel safe. Okay. I think so. Neglect is a little different than abuse. Sorry,
there was a question. Did his dad yell on the street?
I'm sorry. What's the question?
The question was, did his dad yell on the street?
Yes. Yes, that child he did. So we are going to go back to the breakout rooms, and I want to know if anything you just learned about ACEs, because when we started, we didn't know that much about ACEs. You know a little bit more now. Has it changed your opinion or your ideas about whether COVID is an ACE or not? And let's see, and whether it's an ACE for all children. So just think more about the factors that would make it a toxic experience. Okay. All right, so I'm going to open the breakout rooms again, and they'll be shorter this time. They're going to be like 2-3 minutes. Okay, I'll see you soon. I'll broadcast you the question as well.
I need to be sent to the breakout room.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello. Okay, let's see. Little one, quiet, please.
Tracy, it's Tiffany again. There's somebody in the chat wanted to know if there was any certificate that they could print out about attending this.
Yeah, I'll take care of that at the end. Little one, go to bed. Little, shh, shh. Come on. Okay, so I'd like you to share in the chat anything new that you kind of realized or any connection you made between ACEs and COVID. And then I made a list. So fear, anxiety, or feeling unsafe, anger, either at the restrictions or at the people not following the restrictions. So no matter which side of the question people were, are on, or which that's going to be stressful for kids, right? So, and you mentioned a lot of these. So there's increased learning loss for children with special education. I know a friend of mine whose daughter has cerebral palsy. They'd worked for years, and she was telling me today, she did a GoFundMe for $30,000 to get her daughter into these special camps that could really help her with the physical therapy that she needed. And then in COVID, all of a sudden she had no services. And so when she was born, her hand was like this. After all these services, her hand started to be like this. Now it's back to being like this. It's the huge impacts, right, and not having access to those services. And so these are the major supports as well, inside and outside the home. And so as professionals, we can really think about how to create strong social support systems with parents and caregivers. So I'm going to, we're going to hear from a couple of students. We don't have too much time, so I'm going to go ahead and try to get through some of this data. So I wanted to share some of the studies of COVID-19 associations with kids. So this, let's see, wait. So this study actually was just I just heard about it again on the radio today, but this originally was published on, it's pre-publication actually, but it was made available in June. So, or in the summer, but it was before the Delta variant. So this is really profound to look at how many kids experience the loss of a parent or a grandparent caregiver. So over 140,000 children by the end of June. Now this was before the Delta variant, and there were a lot more deaths. So the risk of such loss was 1.1 to 4.5 times higher. So we're again seeing this impact of generational injustice and current injustice on the actual physical health of communities of color. And the highest burden of COVID-19 associated death was in southern border states for Hispanic children. So we can think about the children, the Latino children who are stuck at the border and trying to immigrate and all the stress that they're under. Southeastern states for Black children, and you think about poverty levels and access in those states, that is a mitigating factor as well. And in states with tribal areas for American Indian or Alaska Native populations. So children losing caregivers to COVID-19 need care and safe and stable and nurturing families. So they need that economic support, quality childcare, and evidence-based parenting support programs. So there's a lot of those that we know work that are really great programs. And what we need more resources to be allocated so that we can support everybody who deserves the support. Whoops. Okay. So in terms of mental health issues, compared with 2019, the proportion of mental health related visits for children aged 5 to 11 and 12 to 17 years increased 24% and 31% respectively. Now that is a huge increase in kids going to the emergency, right? Well, not emergency, but pretty much mental health related visits to healthcare professionals. People don't usually go unless it's pretty severe. So in those cases, those are probably an ACE for those children, and that adds another ACE to their to all the ACEs that they might already have. So here's another a national survey that was done by America's Promise Alliance. So this was for high school students. So even though a lot of students were in, Zoom school, only 78% are spending 4 or fewer hours a day in class or working on assignments. Something that's really interesting, even though it's really important for everyone to have access to technology, but that's just the first step, because access to technology for people who don't have it doesn't necessarily lead to people doing more homework. It leads to people doing more gaming. And that's not, in moderation, it's fine, but we don't want kids spending we don't want kids to be spending their time with video games and not learning. So there was a lot of stress about the future and health and well-being. And this is really important. More than 1/4 say they do not feel connected at all to school adults. That is on us. That is on the school adults in all of in their high schools, in this case, high schools, because it was mostly high school students. So not creating the kinds of connections that kids need, because that's absolutely what kids need, right? In order to thrive. So 2 of our students very generously volunteered to share some of their experiences supporting children once they came back to in-person school during COVID. So Katie, I have you first. Are you ready?
Yes, I can be.
All right. So I made this slide from what you emailed me.
I'm sorry, my video is like all glary. I'm gonna try to put it over here. Hello, my name is Katie. I work at Burlingame School at a preschool. The kids are 3 to 4, as it says. But there's we were doing a week of feelings week. So we were all, reading all about the feelings and doing a lot of feeling games. And as you know, a lot of our feelings we see are like under our mask. So I can't see when they're frowning or when they're smiling. But honestly, when I was like doing it with them, I didn't really, we've been wearing masks all day, every day since we started back up again. So it's been pretty normal for us. So I didn't really think about it when we were doing these games, but it's really awesome that I get to share it with you guys today. Just this one kid, Kyle, he was just playing a mirror game with me, and I was saying do this motion and emotion, and then he was showing me how depicting that emotion. And when I said worried, it was super cute because he can't, maybe go like this, like, oh, or like, so he usually uses his whole body and it was like, oh, it's like he was fainting. And that was cute just to see that, kids are actually picking up and noticing more of our body language that we have to show them too, because when I am showing them, like I do notice I forget that they can see me under my mask. Then when I do remember, I try to use my body more to talk to them. And it's nice to see that, he's also doing it, and it's good. And, the kids, they are doing really well in my class. At least they all seem to like really be in touch with their feelings, and despite the mask, I can like really tell when they're squinting that they're really happy or stuff like that. And I try to do some extra squinting. But yeah, it's been really awesome to see them during this time. And yeah, thank you for letting me share.
Katie. So that kind of actually brings us real full circle back to one of the first videos that we saw, right? Because kids having access to their emotions and being able to express them is key. And so using their bodies to express their emotions and doing that mirror game where you basically say that like they follow you or you follow them. It's so your body does what their body does or vice versa. It's a really beautiful way to connect, and you actually don't have to touch or anything like that. But it's a really beautiful way to get connected. So what Katie's talking about is really connecting with kids and providing this safe space for them to express themselves. So that's one thing that's really key, especially right now, right? And the other piece that I think that we have a different opportunity to get in touch with is energetically, is to really pay attention to our bodies. So if we can't see the way the kids' expressions, we can notice in our bodies how we feel, because we will feel that if we practice. We will notice things if we practice noticing what's happening in our body in response to kids. Thank you, Katie, so much. And so I'm going to turn it over to Mika now.
Hi, my name is Mika, and I work at a school in San Francisco. I work with 3s and 4s, and we did what most people did, shut down and did the virtual thing. And then in September of 2020, we reopened, but it was still very strict guidelines. And as teachers, we created a space, an environment that we wanted to be inviting, but also had to be really mindful of the restrictions. And so even though we know that the classroom for 3 and 4-year-olds is such a social place, a lot of things were set up where they may have been playing, but they were playing parallel. And there would be some interaction, but they also knew that there was some worry about getting close. So we did that, and we did it to our best of our abilities. And we also became a much smaller group of children. We were in 21, a class of 21, and we went down to 12 and 11. And or whatever, I don't know, it changed at different times. But when we came back again in September 21, as we know, those restrictions loosened. And we were still wearing masks, but we didn't have to set the classroom up where everybody had individual things and nobody could touch other people's stuff. And, it wasn't so divided. So we recreated our classroom to be the same as we typically would have before COVID. But what we were finding were the children were not necessarily using the space that way. They were still very often playing parallel. They were not really engaging with each other. And along with that, we were noticing that we had a few children who were not really utilizing their voice. One in particular, who his parents came to us and were saying, we're worried he has selective mutism. He's speaking so little. And they were concerned because he did stay home a whole year, and he didn't go to school at all. And he was already a pretty quiet kid, pretty internal for who he is in general. And he was even more so. And so thinking about him, and he wasn't alone, there were other children who were pretty quiet and less engaged and not necessarily joining into what was going on. And then we had a little bit of the other side where we had children really excited to engage, but they couldn't settle. They would try this and try that and run off, and nobody was really settling in to be in the classroom. And as teachers, we were noticing these two pieces, but our focus really became on our one child, I'll call him Jack, who was really just disengaged. We couldn't get any language out of him. He had a very straight face. You had no idea what he needed or didn't need or what he thought. And so we thought about, what are we going to do? We've got to figure out how to penetrate this kid, right? We've got to figure out how to find out what he needs. And we all, as a team, really made time to get to know him by just sitting with him and just seeing what he was doing, maybe doing similar activities around him, talking, whether he talked to us or not. And over time, he started to lean in on us a little bit more. That was our cue that maybe we could wrap our arm around him and pull him in a little closer. Talk to him really softly. We found that when we spoke really softly to him, he began to talk a little bit more to us, but in a whisper. And so we were really mindful to check in on him one-on-one really quietly so that he wasn't being, the other children weren't noticing. It seemed to be a little bit uncomfortable for him when other children were noticing he was getting different attention. And we kept doing these little things, layers to help build our relationship with him. And as he began to trust us more, we started to see more smiles under his masks. We started to see him be a little more playful. And then we thought, okay, he's giving us a clue. Like, what else does he like? We took time to really notice what his strengths were, what his interests were. And we made sure those things were in the classroom, right? We made sure that he had time to do those things. And when we started to see him wanting to do more with the children, we built things into the class that we already do, but we were really mindful about having him have a partner when he did these things, right? Another child. one person. He didn't have to navigate many people, one table. They could work on whatever they were working on. Sometimes they just worked side by side. Sometimes they worked together. One of us was always there to help facilitate, to help bring in some language because he wasn't using a lot of language. We started to have little signals. Is it a thumbs up? Is it a thumbs down? So he didn't have to use words, but he could give us clues. And he started to do that, and the children picked up on that and then did it with him so that he felt like, okay, this is okay that I'm not using my voice. Along with that idea of partner time, which is really just putting a couple kids together and purposely choosing where they go in the classroom for about 10-15 minutes. And we did it with all the children. He wasn't the only one, but we specifically thought about what would help him in particular in these moments. We also thought about things that he was interested in doing, but wasn't quite sure how to get into, was the dramatic play. And so we started to set up certain things. So the children started to show interest in restaurants and airplanes, and we would intentionally set those things up. And a teacher was always there to help facilitate and to help the whole group, but him in particular, have his voice be heard when he wasn't necessarily ready to do that. And because we built that really strong relationship with him, he would whisper in our ear what he needed. So if he was like, I want to be the cook, he would say that. And then we could make a plan, right? We could talk with the other children and figure out how to get his needs met. And one other thing that we're working on now that he is absolutely in love with is we do what we call Storybook Curriculum. And it's basically reading a story, and it's a very simple story. It's often repetitive. And then the children act it out after hearing the story a few times. And we started with Billy Goat's Gruff, really simple, a small, medium, large Billy Goat crossing the bridge and a troll saying, no, you can't go. And he loved it. I mean, he couldn't play it enough. And he started to find his voice more and more. And so it was something that we noticed with a lot of the children, that they just weren't finding their voice. And so even though we were really thinking about him, a lot of other children benefited. The structure of the games were easy to decode. There was someone there to help facilitate it. They didn't have to navigate it alone. A lot of things. And then other things we tried to do were, we noticed he really got more animated and more interested in engaging when he moved his body a lot. So we made sure he took time to go to what we have a sensory room, where there's a padded area and there's swings and climbing things and pillows to squish in. And we made sure he got that time each day and with some friends, so that he could then get his body up and moving, and he'd have a little more affect and a little more engagement. And now he doesn't need to go every day. He's really engaged with his friends. He's finding ways to give that need of proprioceptive input in his body by himself with his peers. And now we're able to bring other kids in. He still comes, but he doesn't need it in the same way. He still uses a softer voice, but he's not standing back. He's not keeping himself away from the group. And like I said, that was something that really stood out when we came back with less restrictions from the COVID year, that many children were standing back and just waiting and wondering, I don't know, just waiting to see what was going to happen, or waiting to see how they would fit in, or how they might get their needs met. And so, not that he wasn't the only one we were thinking of. There were many of them that we were thinking of in that way, but his was the most obvious because he was so pulled in. And like I said, even though he was the one we were thinking of, other children benefited alongside him with the same things we were doing for him. And now, I mean, I wish I wanted to share some photos of different things the kids are doing, but now it looks like an old classroom again. Children are just so excited to be together, building together, holding hands. They weren't allowed to hold hands. They weren't allowed to be near each other. We really had to create these bubbles for them that felt really hard. And you could see the repercussions from that. And so we're trying to rebuild that now. So that's kind of what I have. Hopefully it made sense. Thank you.
Yes, that's so helpful. And I'd like to hear from you in the chat of what did you hear that worked from Mika? Because I want to pull out a few things, but I'd like you to post in the chat. What are some things that you heard that she and her team did? I mean, everything from collaborating, you can tell from when she's talking that she's part of a team that cares about every kid and is going to think about what every kid needs, right? It's really clear. So that's one thing. And that's part of the way that we can systemically create connections between teachers and teaching teams if we're in a director position. And I always recommend look for places that have that. Ask that at an interview. There's a teacher shortage. Ask at an interview, how do you make sure that people work together and collaborate? Do you pay people to have their planning time together? What mechanisms do you put in place to support that? So that was one thing that I noticed. What else have you noticed? What did you notice that she did with the kids or that they did with the kids? Great. Lots of great observations here. Thinking about it from the kids' perspective. And the dramatic play and having opportunities to act out stories. Children need the opportunity to act things out, right? We know that. So having that even more. And I think it's a good example of, so we always want dramatic play, but when we know that there's things that our children are working out, we want to set that environment up a little bit. We don't want to just keep it the same. So you might, if a child is having a new sibling in their home, you might put some more baby dolls in the dramatic play area, right? So it's thinking about ways that are safe for children to come and symbolically work things through. And it's really, one of the things I really loved hearing about is that this is a really good example of when kids have stress, that we can respond to what they need on an individual level and scaffold their social and emotional development. So we respond to them and then they can recover. So it is possible. And some kids need more of that than others. So we have to figure out what each kid needs and try to do our best to support them, right? So I am going to give you this slideshow. I will put a link in the chat, but we're not going to have time for this video, but I really